bull market. We've got a bull market rank of 14 on our trend condition indicator here on S&P 500. Continue to see that expansion here of this trend. We are at the upper end of that range, no question there, but this overall trend continuing to look good with some decent numbers yesterday. That is price momentum. On the other hand, the internals of this S&P 500 market are starting to weaken pretty significantly. We're sitting at 50 on stocks, S&P 500 stocks above their 50-day moving average. So we've got about half of the stocks that have trended back down below 50-day moving average as the S&P is moving higher. That should be a little concerning for internal breadth, where we're seeing distribution into these selling days on some of these weaker names or stocks that are not comprised of that top 20% of the S&P 500. We haven't seen much pop in fear, the fear index, which is the VIX, and that is bearish to the downside 14. That is what we want to see in a bull market. We actually want to see this one exactly opposite of the S&P 500. When that starts to shift, that'll give us a little bit more indication that there is some fear and some potential selling starting to come into the market. We haven't really seen that quite yet. If we jump over and take a look at the indices here, actually, the NASDAQ had a big, nice run yesterday. My screen just froze here. There it goes. The NASDAQ had a nice move yesterday, up a couple of percent in that, on that CPI number. S&P 500, which we've just looked at, also bullish. We're seeing Russell, a tiny bit of weakness here in Russell 2000 as it's ticked down one bearish point there to that downside. And then bonds actually are looking interesting. We're getting that compression here of trend. We're seeing some support right here. This is on the short-term end of the yield curve, SHY diamonds. I'm going to actually pull that up here. And TLT, that long bond, that long-term bond, still having some issue in that trend. It's had that longer-term retracement, attempting a shot at more upside. We'll see how that pans out. If we jump over to sectors and scroll through, some of the sectors here, we're seeing technology continuing to do well. Consumer discretionary also, you're starting to see that fanning effect where it's had this big run. That's an indication here when you start to get that extreme of a potential pause in the overall trend. That's consumer discretionary. Industrials still looking strong. Overall, a little bit of weakness here in industrials. Energy, as oil has been pulling back, oil's starting to get a little bit of a move. We'll look at that here in just a moment as well, but some bearishness overall in energy. Financials, I'm going to go through some of these relatively quickly as we're getting more and more comfortable with this format. Bearishness on real estate, seeing some weakness there, potentially for continuation to that downside or a little bit deeper retracement. Utilities also showing some weakness with that bearish number of 8. So we've got 6 to the bull side, 8 to the bear side, and basic materials 14 to the downside. So seeing some weakness, continuation in weakness in basic materials. Consumer staples also showing some weakness with some potential breakdown of that trend line there. So we're also seeing some weakness internally with sectors across the board, and that's one of the other things that we want to be paying attention to. And in this case, we've got transportation, and then we've got healthcare, which has also been in this downtrend and continues to be in that downtrend. This $62 range repelling that. USO, the oil market, had a big move here yesterday, 3%, 2.7%. GLD also back up into that 14 range. So when we get this compression here, it can compress, but it can actually move back up to these numbers. You can get that full 14 number either when they're compressed or they're not. An example of that is back here where we're seeing this compression of these trends, and then they start to expand and start to fan out. So even in a solid uptrend like we've seen in gold, we can see that compression, and then it can move back into that 14 range. SLV also doing something similar, potential pullback in that overall uptrend to keep an eye on. A couple stocks to consider today. A similar web, SMWB, nice confirmation bar here, increasing volume in the momentum zone. And one other stock to consider that I wanted to take a look at was OWL. OWL, we've actually got a trade set up on that for this morning, and you can see that nice confirmation bar here, increased volume, moving in the momentum zone for OWL. That'll do it for today's update. Everyone have a fantastic day today.